Hello, and welcome back to Equity, TechCrunch's flagship podcast about the business of startups. Today is August 16th, 2024. I'm Marianne Azevedo, and joining me today is TechCrunch senior reporter and editor Kirsten Korosec. Kirsten, what's going on in your world this week?
I mean, the only thing really that I'm interested in this world right now is the great Waymo honkathon that's been happening in San Francisco. I don't know if you've heard about this. To be clear, it has been resolved now, but this software engineer set up a live stream from her apartment looking down at this parking depot that Waymo Robotaxis were using. And every morning around 4 a.m. when they would come home to sleep, I guess, as they were parking, they are programmed to honk, if a car is reversing into them. But when you have dozens of these Robotaxis all parking at once, it was like a chorus of honking every morning at 4 a.m. So she set up this live stream with this lo-fi beats in the background now so you can observe them. And now the honking has been resolved, but that's been the chatter around the San Francisco streets and on my beat this week.
My goodness.
Lo-fi chill beats to honk and park to. Beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah, beautiful indeed. And hey, that voice you're hearing, that's Devin Coldewey. He's a senior editor at TechCrunch and one of our resident AI experts. We're thrilled to have him on the show today. Devin, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. Yeah, AI is nothing but great news and all kinds of fun stuff all day long. So we're having a wonderful time covering AI these days.
Yes.
Devin, how does it feel to be the resident AI expert? Pressure?
Well, it's funny because I started covering AI because it was just a weird scientific topic years and years ago. It was just one of the many things that you'd cover is there's a paper came out. They can now use machine learning to do this and that. And that was in 2016. And I just covered it as that thing. And then all of a sudden AI becomes this industry transforming technology. And everybody's like, Devin, you know about AI, right? And I'm like, no one does. I guess I'm the closest thing we've got. But literally no one has any idea about this technology, but it's been interesting to learn along with everybody else. But it's nice to have the context of 10 years of writing about and learning about the technology in its infancy.
Yes, so you were writing about it, learning about it before it was even, I guess,
cool. Yes.
Yeah. Very happy to have you on the show today. And so I'm going to run down our deals of the week. We've got some diverse but interesting deals. We're looking at WeRide, EliseAI, and Grok. Then we'll be taking a look at a couple of startup shutdowns that took place this week. And then lastly, looking at California's new AI bill. So Kirsten, China's autonomous vehicle startup WeRide is seeking a U.S. IPO at a $5 billion valuation. That's a lot of money. Tell us more.
Yeah, so you basically just gave the TLDR. They're hoping to debut coming up here soon on the NASDAQ. It's an interesting deal in that they're expecting to raise about $96 million, although if underwriters, go for all the options, that's going to be about just shy of $120. Then on top of that, there are some investors, specifically the venture arm of Renault, Nissan, Mitsubishi Alliance, that have agreed to buy shares worth about $320 million in a concurrent private placement. So that's the money part. The interesting part about the WeRide thing is this is a Chinese autonomous vehicle company. They're considered one of the leading ones in China. They actually do testing here in the United States, in California specifically. The real story here to me is the geopolitical intrigue, because there are a ton of risks for this company. Tariffs, the geopolitical tension between China and the United States, increasing U.S. government controls on exports that could potentially limit access to things like semiconductor chips, the data privacy security concerns by the US government of, let's say, a Chinese autonomous vehicle company testing in the United States. So all of these risks, and yet WeRide is still willing to go to the US markets, which to me is the most interesting part about this.
Pretty bold, huh?
Yeah, I think it shows that it is difficult to raise money in China. There's certainly plenty of state government-supported incentives and subsidies, but in terms of raising money, the New York Times highlighted a survey by Deloitte that showed the number of IPOs in mainland China fell something like 75% in the first half of 2024. And this is a result of like Chinese market regulators tightening listing requirements and things like that. And so in spite of all these risks, WeRide's like, okay, we want to scale, we want money, let's try the US marketplace.
That's always really interesting to me. I've seen this with some other Chinese companies that have come over to the US, and I wonder whether they really just have to budget it out as like, look, this could be a total crater, but the potential upside is so high, and the potential of getting our foot in the door is so valuable that it's worth just burning that $50 million or $100 million, whatever it might be. It's just interesting to see the different businesses like enter this differently regulated environment and seeing what they do.
Yeah, totally. And on that note, this same week, WeRide received approval to, California is a little bit wonky when it comes to regulating AVs, and I'm not going to get into it here, but basically they've received another permit that's going to allow them to test driverless with passengers in California. This is through the CPUC, or California Public Utilities Commission. So you see that they're scaling here in the United States. Granted, still testing and stuff, but it used to be always viewed as like, oh, this talent play or, grabbing technology. And I think it's changed. It's different now. I mean, I think talent's a big part of it, but it's also just playing in two totally different markets and accessing cash.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about everyone else, but I'm not super excited about more robotaxis anywhere, but who cares what I think?
Well, you happen to live in a place with a lot of robotaxi testing. So I think that like you are naturally, let's say, cautious about them in your hometown.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. Well, next up on my deal of the week is a startup called Elise AI. And Elise AI is this company that says it's developing a suite or has developed a suite of AI-powered property management tools for landlords. They raised a $75 million Series D, now valued at $1 billion, which these days is not very common. I was intrigued by this. I know that on the team we have some differing thoughts on this sort of tool, but what this company claims to do is help landlords, I guess, communicate better with prospective tenants and existing tenants. So if you're interested in an apartment tour or learning about a certain complex, you can communicate with this chatbot and set up a tour. Or if you are a tenant, you can send in a request of, oh, I need something fixed, and this chatbot will respond to you. So it's had some reviews that the chatbot is not always successful in terms of handing off requests to an actual human. So, there are always limitations when it comes to bots. We have to be clear. But I was kind of surprised at how many customers this company has. It's been around already for about 7 years. They have more than 350 customers, including 70% of the top 50 rental housing operators in the US.
Oh, Devin has opinions on this one, I can tell.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you what the biggest red flag of the whole thing is that 70% of the top 50 rental operators are customers. I just simply think that when it comes to landlords and property owners, any tools they use are designed to save them money, not renters. Rent keeps going up, and yet somehow the renters, the people who own these properties, are using these, like constantly there's tools that are cutting costs, that are making things more efficient, and yet the rent keeps going up. Isn't that a little weird? We've already seen automation and AI being put to the purpose of price fixing and collaboration between rental operators using platforms like this. They don't call each other and say, hey, we should raise rents in this area, but they all talk to a platform that automatically says, hey, everybody could probably raise rents a little bit in this area. And it's basically a form of collusion with a third party, which is a very common form of shifting the responsibility for collusion. Like antitrust authorities are very familiar with this kind of thing. And here you have something that is like, a chatbot, and that's totally different. But I just think that if all these people are using it, the only explanation to me is it saves time and money for the property owners.
Right.
Yeah. Well, to your point, Devin, the company says that on average, the chatbots have boosted lease tour bookings by 125% and decreased overdue payments by 50%. Ding, ding. That's what you were talking about. Yes, they want their money. They want their money on time. So that probably is a big driver here. Of course, they're saying, yes, we can help get tenants' requests sooner and help them with maintenance stuff too. But I see your point. There is obviously this component of we want to get paid on time. We want more people to be able to view our properties as well.
So I was Devin, you'll be happy to know that I was a villainous property owner, landlord at one point in my life.
Some of my best friends were landlords. It's okay. Seriously.
It's okay. We're all human. And this was like a single home. So to be clear, this is not like some giant operation. So I would never use a product like this. I see a benefit of using an AI chatbot in terms of like scheduling tours or handling payment questions. I think where it becomes clearly a downside potentially for the renter is when it's about services that need to be provided to the renter, like a plumbing issue or a leaky roof or things like that. Now, if it takes away that friction and delay, great. But if the AI chatbot is simply just replying and then nothing is happening and you can't contact a human, that becomes really a frustrating experience. And I could see, to Devin's point, why it would be incredibly popular with, large scale property owners. To me, what actually was the most interesting thing about this deal is that they are expanding into healthcare, which I was like, whoa, okay. So I guess the founder thinks that the company's tech stack can be adapted to serve health clinics' administrative needs. There are a lot of AI chatbots out there already in healthcare. So, Marianne, I had some questions about that. Do you know how this would be applied? It seems like a competitive area.
Well, I didn't report this out, but basically, like you said, that they want to try to help clinics do things like schedule appointments with billing, with payments. And it was last year, I think, they launched a product called Health AI. So it's already out there. I find it kind of interesting because you're right, that's definitely a more crowded space. I think a lot of doctors' offices or clinics use some sort of technology like this. I don't really know more about it other than that, but definitely the CEO said that exactly what you said, that they think that much of the company's tech stack can be adapted to serve these clinics' needs. And they said several providers are already using it. There are competitors like one called Hyro, which also uses AI to handle text and voice conversations between healthcare organizations and their patients. I will say I've been dealing a lot with healthcare related stuff. And I have seen an increase of like text messages, mostly for reminding us about payments, appointments, of course. But there is something to be said, though, when I get a text about a payment, as opposed to getting paper in the mail, I'm a lot more likely to click the link on my phone, set up the payment, than I am to get that paper and then have to deal with, I'm going to pay my bill. So anyway, I don't really know what EliseAI's chances are in this space. I think it's crowded, but I guess they have enough confidence in what they've built to try it out.
Yeah, I think that there's certainly merit in meeting patients and renters and other folks in those positions where they are. Whereas before, like you said, it's often, hey, call the office, send in the mail the check to this or that or whatever. It's good to have these better tools. I'm just concerned that the tools are in the hands of the people who already, screwed it up. They already made it hard enough. And they're like, oh, here's some tools to make it easier for you.
Yeah, well, no, I think we're right to be skeptical. Speaking of tools, Devin, your deal of the week is XAI released Grok-2 and added image generation on X. I don't know why that was so hard to say. Okay, I am clueless. I'll be honest. Please fill us in. What the heck does this mean?
Well, it's not like a deal so much, but like, the AI world is so weird because it doesn't really make money. It's not really clear how anything works or who built what with whose money. And Grok is the most, like, the weirdest of all because Grok is the large language model, like ChatGPT and Claude. It's a large language model, but it's built by XAI, which is Elon Musk's AI company that he spun up basically out of spite after breaking up with OpenAI and Sam Altman and all that. And it's made this chatbot, which, by all accounts is fine. It's very hard to tell how good these chatbots really are because there's no good measurements of like, they test them on these benchmarks, but they're not. The benchmarks are just like, you can game them. So he's putting it out there. He's making it available to everybody on Twitter. And there's a new version 2, that just came out. I think it's only available to paying people right now. And so as such, it's being used to like, generate poems about how beautiful Elon Musk is and stuff like that. But they also added, the thing is, it's like there's a lot of chatbots being used in lots of different places. So when somebody releases a big new one, there's immediately a flurry of activity to find out, like, is this significantly better? Is it worse? Has this been a huge waste of millions of dollars in compute, in training it? So everybody's sort of scrambling to evaluate, and that's the phase we're in right now. But the more sort of immediately interesting part is that they tapped a startup called Black Forest Labs to provide the image generation capability. They're a German company, and they are funded by Andreessen and a bunch of people. They have a totally uncensored image model, or not uncensored completely. You can't do like porn on it, but you can, like show, and like everybody is showing pictures of Trump and Musk and everybody else, like crashing planes into the World Trade Centers and stuff like that. It's like, oh my God, you're seeing the imagery that's going around on Twitter right now. And it's clear that this is just a huge bull in a china shop situation. And that is sometimes good because it shakes up other parts of the industry. So we may see Grok and X attract a lot of legal attention, almost certainly, and a lot of regulatory attention that might otherwise have had to be tested out by a smaller company or a more mainstream company. So it's just interesting to see someone just barge into the room and knock everything down, but nobody really knows what's going to go on.
Well, Elon is definitely the person who barges in and knocks stuff down. Of course, the big flag here for me is, and it's nothing new, but heading into an election, the large amounts of misinformation that's already out there that AI is being used to propagate. And this is another tool that does that. And it just seems like a fire hose of more information that we as humans can like possibly disseminate and filter and digest. And so here is another one that has zero guardrails on it. So I'll be curious to see on the regulatory front, leading up to the election here in the US, if there is pressure for Grok-2 to put some limits to its use. My guess is that there will be a big fight and that there won't be, but we'll see.
I guess the problem is simply that most of these companies have voluntary limits. There's very few legal limits on what you can do, even when it comes to generating images of politicians and stuff like that. Like, if you're careful, you can tell Grok to generate a news release from the Biden-Harris campaign and an image of Harris and Waltz doing something they never did and produce this whole fake narrative and spread it on X. And there's no guardrails against it because it's private speech on a private platform. And there's no, FCC or FTC or FEC. There's no limits at all on this kind of private speech. But if it becomes amplified, as it does, it could have a huge effect. But there really is no statutory, the senators can send angry letters, but they can't say, hey, you're under arrest for election interference, because the rules are behind. And that's why we're trying to set up the, new regulatory systems.
It'll be super interesting to see how all that plays out. Well, we've got to head to break, but after the break, we'll get into some sad news of startup shutdowns. So stay with us.
Hey everyone, it's Becca Skutak, and I'm here with my esteemed co-host,
me, Dominic Midori Davis, and we're here to tell you about Found, the TechCrunch podcast where we bring you the stories behind the startups.
Each week, we talk with a founder about how they started their company, what gave them the idea, and how it's been going since.
We're having conversations about what it's really like to build and run a company, and we aren't just talking about the rosy narratives you hear from the success stories.
Of course, we are still talking about the big wins and the best days, but we're also touching on the mistakes that help founders learn and grow too.
What have been a few of your favorites, Becca?
I personally love chatting with Matt Rogers about his new food waste startup, Mill, and what he learned from his experience building both Nest and working on the original iPod at Apple.
See, all of the good stuff. And if it sounds interesting to you, then you should subscribe to Found on your podcast platform of choice. We have new episodes out every Tuesday morning.
So this week we had not one, but two startup shutdowns, and both happened to be in the fintech space. Ouch. Contrary to what our readers might think, when we get scoops about shutdowns or layoffs, it's not something we enjoy reporting on. Yes, of course we like to get scoops, but these are not fun things for us to write about. It it's a bummer when companies have to shut down and lay off people. So many lives are impacted. So just want to say that up front. So on Monday, actually, I covered the shutdown of a fintech called Tally. This one got a lot of attention, I think, because it raised so much money and was around for about 9 years. It raised $172 million in funding. It had some pretty high-profile backers, including Andreessen Horowitz, Kleiner Perkins. And it was valued, I think, close to $855 million at the last time it raised, which was 2022. So, here's a company that had a lot of things going for it in terms of capital behind it, high-profile backers. And yet it shut down, and it shut down because after exploring all options, quote, it was unable to secure the necessary funding to continue its operations. So Tally was a fintech that helped consumers manage and pay off their credit card debt. They were what they kind of were dubbed as a debt robo-advisor. And supposedly they were trying to help people consolidate debt into like lower interest rate loans. And I think, just this current macroeconomic environment with the high interest rates and a lot of delinquencies, I don't know for sure, but I think all of that contributed to the company's demise.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. There was also another shutdown this week, which was Score, and that was the dating app for people with good to excellent credit. And I want to talk about that in a minute. But in this one, there's been a number of shutdowns in your area, in my area of expertise in transportation. And I don't know if this is the case with this one, so I'd be curious what your opinion is. But I saw a ton of companies during COVID scrambling and raising a bunch of money, over-hiring, over-indexing. And then in 2023, and now sort of the lingering effects 2024, blaming it on economic conditions, but also they had completely spent more money than really their runway would allow them to exist. And so at least in my area, I'm seeing that happen. Companies shutting down because they just ran out of runway and they had overhired in 2021, 2022. Is that the case with this, or is it really more, like you said, an interest rates issue?
Yeah, I really don't know. I did see a chart floating out there on social media of how the company's employee or their headcount had dropped pretty dramatically over the past year or two. Earlier this year, they actually were shifting. They pivoted from B to C. They were saying they were going to actually sunset their consumer app and shift to B2B, which was a huge red flag that something was not going well. If it had been doing this for like 9 years and all of a sudden was shifting to B2B is not a good sign. So yeah, I really don't know for sure. I wish I knew more about what exactly went on behind the scenes. I will say though, that when I posted about this, a lot of people seemed genuinely like kind of bummed. Like this was one of those companies that actually was perceived to have more of a noble mission and not so much just out there trying to make a ton of money, but apparently really had this noble mission of wanting to help people who had found themselves in a lot of debt and wanted to dig themselves out of it. But yeah, I mean, when we're dealing with really high interest rates, we're dealing with more people having trouble making payments. I'm sure all of that contributed, but I cannot tell you for sure exactly what went on behind the scenes.
So this...
in the case of Score.
Yeah.
The case of Score was a little different.
Yeah. So here's the thing, like, is this a fintech story or just another dating app that is having problems? Because there's a bunch of dating apps out there right now that are like, it seems like their time right now is over for a bit and they're just all struggling. So is this a fintech story or a dating app story?
I mean, that's a good question. I think it's a little bit of both. So Dominic Midori Davis wrote about Score. Gosh, I guess it was a few months ago, February. Wow. Yeah. And so it was a dating app for people with, quote, good to excellent credit. And of course, that attracted also a lot of attention because people were like, what? So you can, you get on and you're talking about your credit scores. I mean, and is this classist? There was accusations of it being classist towards people who didn't have high credit scores. But the company maintains that it was only supposed to be a pop-up app and it was only supposed to be around for 90 days, but it received so much user interest that the parent company, which is called Neon Money Club, decided to keep it open for 6 months. It racked up about 18,000 users, made 8,000 matches, and then decided to shut down. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's probably a little bit of both. I mean, I've never used a dating app. I realize there are a bunch of them out there, but it feels like this was a very niche category or target market.
Yeah, I'm going to also say, like, what a weird idea to find someone with a high credit score. But I don't know. Maybe I'm an oddball here.
Well, I think the CEO, he said, or he told Dom that it was really not just about that. He said if anyone called this app classes, that they didn't read the mission behind it. The app connected a lot of good people who are looking to prioritize financial health, and it made people more aware of their credit health, and it connected them to educational resources to help them with their credit journey. So, I mean, I don't know.
Okay.
I was surprised when I first read about it, and I'm not shocked about it shutting down, but I think I'm a little surprised about how quickly. But, they're saying this was sort of the plan to begin with. And they're also kind of putting a call out of, hey, we're happy to let someone acquire what we've built or learned so far. If you're interested, call me.
Interesting.
Not me. That's what the CEO said.
I think it's classist. Classist, let it die. I'm happy with letting this become a footnote in 2024's weird history.
Yeah, I mean, I have to kind of agree that I don't love the concept.
Yeah. So also before we move on, I know we have one more thing to talk about, but are we going to start seeing a trend of when a startup dies that they're like, oh, actually, JK, it was just meant to be a pop-up all
Just
along.
a pop-up.
And
Just a pop-up.
yeah, and not really something that was successful and supposed to make money. Just a fun thing. You know, I don't know if I buy that, but
we're pivoting to failure.
Yeah, I would say, these were two very different types of shutdowns. One with a company that had been around for a long time, raised a lot of capital. Another that really seemed very much more experimental. But as mentioned, I think anytime there are shutdowns, we do find it kind of to be sad because, again, there are actual humans being impacted by these things. So moving on, we are lastly going to talk about this new AI bill in California, SB 1047. We touched upon this last week. It's supposedly aimed at preventing AI disasters, but a lot of people in Silicon Valley are warning that it will actually cause disasters. So, Devin, of course, would love to hear what you think about this.
Well, it's tough to say because AI regulation, everything is necessarily kind of ad hoc because no one knows how AI is developing or what it's really capable of. I'm not talking about AGI and it's going to turn into Skynet or anything, but really is it good enough to take over this category of jobs? Is it good enough that we can rely on it for this government loan program or whatever? It's not really clear. And a lot of people think that having any regulation right now is premature. But then everybody else is like, well, we have to have something because these guys are just running around making AIs that can do all kinds of stuff with no regulation whatsoever. Personally, I like the idea of sort of erring on the side of over-regulating at the start. And you can always pull that back. You can make little easements in the law. And I think that California has done that generally with emerging categories. They have been the one out front saying, hey, we're going to regulate with an eye to safety and this other stuff. And if you don't like it, deal with it.
You know what? I neglected to actually describe what this bill is specifically aiming to do. So apologies. It's aiming to regulate AI at the model level and mandates that frontier models that cost at least $100 million and use something that is a language that I don't understand, 26 flops during training, that they must conduct safety testing.
No, as you mentioned, this is the key thing is that it's in the law that it's $100 million models. If you make an AI model that costs you $100 million to train, or I think it's something like 10 teraflops, it's some enormous amount of compute to create, which at present it's not clear. Maybe GPT-4 falls under this category. The next version of Llama might fall under this category. These are huge, huge, huge expensive models made by giant companies. And the opposition to it is largely along the lines of basically, this is going to chill the startup ecosystem. And it's look, if you've got $100 million, I would not call you a startup. And if this isn't even $100 million in funding, it's $100 million that you're spending on a single foundation model. That kind of outlay requires some kind of oversight, in my opinion. And so when they say, it's going to be a problem, it's going to harm our budding AI ecosystem. That's according to Fei Li, which she is an incredible scholar and an entrepreneur. But I think her company is also on the larger side, and she's going to be doing foundation models. And all these companies would rather be unregulated. That's as clear as you can make it here.
Yeah. I mean, Devin, I think the question here is why do you hate innovation so much?
Yeah. Exactly. And I hate it personally, but it doesn't, we don't need to hate it structurally.
But I did have an actual thing. We were talking about this earlier because I wanted to sort of like understand exactly what was going on. And you said something that was interesting, which was like, hey, if you have the ability to spend $100 million on building a foundation model, you probably have the $1 million to hire the lawyers required to comply with the regulations, and that this is really not hitting that startup ecosystem. My question for you is there any downside to regulation? For instance, startups at a very low level, maybe aspirationally will hit this $100 million or be so large that they would even qualify, either setting up shop in a different country or state, or is there any downside to this bill in California?
There's always the risk of flight, but I think that the risk is being deliberately overstated by the opposition. But it's paperwork. It's not like they're saying, oh, you need to include a government backdoor, like we sometimes hear from the intelligence community with privacy bills and stuff like that. This is not a substantive thing. Like, you're filing paperwork and you have to have the ability to shut down the model on short notice, if it's producing catastrophic harm, which I would hope you would want to have that anyway. So I really don't think that this is too onerous of a requirement. And it's not even going to cost you $1 million. Plus, you'll probably be able to pay some startup that will appear to do this kind of compliance work for you. I just don't think that it's that big of a deal. And the fact that it targets such large models, which can only be created by a handful of companies and people with this amount of capital, it's like when you have, here in Washington, Seattle, there was an attempt to have a head tax, or like a seat tax, basically, but only for companies that had, more than 1,000 employees or something like that. They're like, oh, this is going to stifle innovation. It's going to make people move out of state. And it's like, oh, what innovation? Like, there's 1,000 employees. This is only going to hit huge companies that can afford the extra, like 1% or something like that. It's not even going to touch the small companies that are in a fragile state and, need every penny to keep the lights on while they're researching their new frontier model. I just don't buy the argument against it, although I do think the companies involved, like OpenAI, Anthropic, and venture capitalists, have been lobbying against it and suggesting some amendments that kind of undercut some of the bill a bit. And I do believe we are going to see some of those amendments adopted. I don't know exactly which ones or when, but my guess is the bill will pass with some significant kneecapping, but it'll serve as a useful ground floor to test out what the actual cost of regulation like this is. Because in a year or two, when it comes into effect, and all of a sudden everybody finds out, oh, it costs like $5,000 and 2 hours of a lawyer's time to comply with this law, then everybody who opposed it saying, oh God, it's going to shut down, Meta, is going to look like a fool and a total cry wolf kind of crybaby.
Yeah, I have to say, though, I do agree with you. Let's err on the side of caution here. And the state senator, Scott Weiner, who authored the bill, he said, we have a history with technology of waiting for harms to happen and then wringing our hands. Let's not wait for something bad to happen. Let's just get out ahead of it. That kind of makes sense to me. But yeah, we'll see what happens. We'll see if there's amendments. We'll see if this passes. Let's stay tuned. Anyway, we're going to have to leave it there, but never fear, Equity will be back next week. Until then, you can find us under the handle at EquityPod on X and Threads. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Equity is produced by Teresa Loconsolo with editing by Kel. Bryce Durbin is our illustrator, and we'd like to give a big thanks to our audience development team and Henry Pickavett, who manages TechCrunch audio products. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.